Who extended these warrants? Mr. Rosenstein. And Mr. Rosenstein answers to no one. He is a veteran member of the deep state. He has a serious conflict because the information regarding FISA warrants and how they were issued against the Trump campaign, which he refuses to turn over to Congress, has a major conflict in it, in that he is the one who extended these warrants. This is why he should step down or be terminated.
4 hours away from the president's summit with Vladimir Putin, which will take place right behind me in the presidential palace. Now, the White House says they're proceeding as planned, despite calls from people like yourself to cancel it. They also say that the indictments issued on Friday strengthen President Trump's hand when it comes to confronting Putin about election interference. Your response?
Well, of course, that's not the president's intention. The president, as you pointed out, Jake, knew these indictments were coming, and yet was telegraphing he thought the meeting with Putin was going to be easier, in fact, than meeting with our own allies. So Putin is getting a lot just by taking this meeting. After all, part of the reason for this indictment is to stigmatize those involved in interfering in our election. Putin is essentially an unindicted co-conspirator, and not just any co-conspirator. He's the ringmaster of this conspiracy, and he's going to be sitting down at the table with Donald Trump. And Trump is basically saying that indictment is just a witch hunt. That's a great gift for Vladimir Putin. So I think if Kim Jong-un can eat the president's lunch, which I think he clearly did, it will be a very easy matter for Vladimir Putin.
Democrats were calling on the president to cancel the summit. We also heard from Senator John McCain, who said if President Trump is not prepared to hold Putin accountable, the summit in Helsinki should not move forward.
John McCain, typical John McCain. He was reaching for that brass ring of being the United States president so badly that he was willing to betray his own party's nominee, which is Trump, that he was willing to give the FBI this fake dossier, because there's what, like 3 or 4 different copies of it. He was willing to vote down the repeal of Obamacare. He was the lone vote on that killed the Obamacare repeal. So you can thank John McCain for that. The man is an absolute walking, talking tragedy. He's dying of cancer. You know, it's in his brain. And he's, you know, for somebody whose brain is supposedly cancer-ridden, and I know for a fact I do chemo, and my brain isn't what it should be because of the chemo. This guy hasn't been in Washington in 10 months, and he is still collecting a paycheck. He is still getting the benefits of being a senator, and he won't step down. That is just uncalled for. 10 months of absenteeism. What job in the world could you be gone for 10 months and still get paid for?
Obviously, the summit is moving forward, but will the president hold Putin accountable? And I don't mean just ask him if he did it or if the Russians did it.
It's the first time he's meeting Putin in person on a one-on-one talk, Mr. John Carl. Are you really this fucking stupid? That is probably one of the most stupid questions. Go over there and give Putin a bloody nose is what he's saying. And that ain't how shit works. If you think you can do a better job, then you need to run for president.
Is he actually going to confront President Putin with the evidence that it was Russian?
Trump is not a fucking lawyer, you asswipe. What's he supposed to do? Go over there, well, you did this and this and this and this and this, and here's the evidence of it. Putin's going to look at him and say, who are you?
Interference, Russian government interference with our election.
Well, look, you have 2 indictments by the Justice Department already. I think the Russians are well aware of that. How this conversation is going to go, I think, will be determined by the 2 parties. We have asked, and the Russians have agreed, that it will be basically unstructured. We're not looking for concrete deliverables here. I think it's very important that the president have a direct one-on-one conversation with President Putin. That's how this is going to start off. And I might say that every European leader that we've met with on this trip, including most recently on Friday, Prime Minister Theresa May of the United Kingdom, has said they support this meeting going forward. The British have significant concerns about the Russian use of a chemical agent against people here in Great Britain, and as they pointed out, that constitutes a chemical weapons attack against the nuclear power. Prime Minister May was very strong in her conversation with the President about that, and I'm sure the President has that in mind as well. There are going to be a lot of very difficult issues on the agenda here with President Putin, and I think President Trump is prepared to raise all of them.
During my exclusive sit-down interview with Julian Assange at the Ecuadorian Embassy in London, I asked him specifically about the FBI and DHS report on 2016 and the election hacking. Let's take a look. The FBI, Department of Homeland Security, this goes to the 29th of December this past year, released a joint report detailing how federal investigations and investigators linked the Russian government to the hacks of the Democratic Party organization. And they gave a 13-page memo. I'm sure you've read it.
I have read it in detail.
At this point, okay. Supposedly they give technical details regarding tools and some of the infrastructure of the Russian civilian and military intelligence, but they don't give any proof positive.
They give a five-page description of some of the tools that they allege that the Russian state uses. The rest is just fairly boring security recommendations. On the top, there is a disclaimer saying nothing.
I was going to ask you about that.
Guarantee that any of this information is accurate.
Right. It's a guess.
So if you, it's just you look in the. I used to be a computer security expert. That was my job. This is a bad report, and you look in the rest of the computer security community, you'll see dozens of other computer security experts in the United States. Absolutely not.
Isn't it contradicted though by our own Director of Intelligence, National Intelligence?
James Clapper.
That's James Clapper.
There's nothing in that report that says that any information was given to us. Nothing. What they have is what they call indicators. So like a way to recognize if these tools, these alleged Russian tools, have been used on your system. Okay. So in response to that, some engineer at one of the US electricity companies found this signature on one of their laptops. Okay, so then this was analyzed by a wide range of US computer security experts. I've read those reports in detail, and it's discovered this is a commercially available tool produced by Ukraine. So it's straight out of the bat, we either have a deliberate attempt to mislead or thoroughly incompetent work. Straight out of the bat. So that story about the laptop at the power generation center, that was picked up by the Washington Post and the administration, pushed everywhere, that here's the Russians infiltrating the electricity grid, and it was completely bogus.
That was bogus. But there's another side of this which is, I think, pretty fascinating. That is that Hillary Rodham Clinton had a private server at a mom-and-pop shop in a bathroom closet that I would argue, and other lawyers would make arguments that it was illegal for her to have. From what we understand, the Podesta emails were hacked through a phishing scheme where it said, click on this, give us your information, and he did so. So we made it.
Well, there's a number of hacks of the DNC and Podesta based on the publicly available information. This is not something coming from our sources. We published, as part of our policy of full disclosure, not interfering with the material, we published the several Podesta emails, which shows Podesta responding to a phishing email. Now, how did they respond? Podesta gave out that his password was the word password. His own staff said, this email that you've received, this is totally legitimate. So this is something a 14-year-old kid could have hacked Based on that. That way. In relation to computer security and Hillary Clinton's security, those Secretary of State emails, if you read closely FBI reports and the emails that we released related to Hillary Clinton, you'll see Aberdeen had access to them. A variety of technicians at this very small IT company had access to them. They were shipped through the post in a laptop. She had over a dozen different devices keyed in to have access to them, her iPad, etc. She made almost no attempt to keep them secure from states. Now, was she trying to keep them secure from the Republicans? Well, probably. But in terms of foreign states, almost no attempt.
The reason we have these laws, though, are for transparency, and she wanted to avoid congressional oversight.
Absolutely. That's absolutely my interpretation as well. Now, WikiLeaks has been a very strong proponent of the Freedom of Information Act. This is probably actually, if you think about it, probably against our interests as a publisher. But we believe that people have the right to know true information about what the government is doing. Now, the Freedom of Information Act has been subverted. We published Sarah Palin's emails. Why? Because she had, when she was governor of Alaska, she maintained an account that was being used, intentionally or not, to evade the Alaskan Freedom of Information Act. So we published that back in 2008.
Hasn't anyone noticed a pattern in these phony panics yet? Definitely not the media, who are like infants. Trump holds his fingers in front of his eyes and says, "Peekaboo!" and they all scream. Works every time. Until he feeds them some strained peas, and then everything's okay. Actually, tremendous progress has been made.
Tremendous progress has been made. Everyone's agreed to substantially up their commitment. They're going to up it at levels that they've never thought of before.
Right. In other words, they never thought of keeping their promises to pay their fair share. And that's the media's real complaint here, that we risked being rude, asking for what's owed to us in public. Oh, we're such hopeless rubes. It's like when the dinner bill comes, Germany is that dude who heads to the John, leaving you to pay, and he expects you will because you're an American. But he never dined with Trump, who won't let you go to the bathroom. He will demand cash to your face. Germany's tab isn't paid on NATO, which was designed, of course, to curb Soviet expansion, yet the country's making massive oil deals with the Russians. Sorry, I think Trump has a right to call Germany out for skipping out to do lines with Putin. Pipelines. Now, Trump wants everyone to up their defense spending. Why would he do that? Maybe to get them to meet the target they already failed to meet? Could he be perhaps a stable genius?
I'm a very stable genius.
Yes. Now, as Trump tutors us on NATO, what is England's response?
Here's a rather amusing way for protesters to show they're not so keen on his visit here to the UK. Here you have it, the Donald Trump inflatable baby.
They have come a long way since Churchill. A child's response to adult actions, kids playing with a balloon. Now, Trump is supposed to meet with Putin, which means that Monday, Brian Stelter and Christiane Amanpour will once again put on their chicken suits and tell us it's the end of the world. And already they've forgotten the Peter Strzok hearing. Remember that?
I don't recall writing that text.
If I could give you a Purple Heart, I would.
Parliamentary inquiry.
The time is controlled by the gentleman from
Parliamentary inquiry.
A parliamentary inquiry is not in order. Because you don't want it to be you and Lisa
Mr.
Page.
Chairman,
You don't want it to be the FBI.
I'm given 5 minutes to answer questions. We have indulged this harassment.
We endured 15 minutes of badgering of the witness. Can you share with us
the gentleman is not in order.
making up as you go along?
The gentleman will suspend.
If it's so frustrating, answer the question.
The gentleman has already answered that question. So now the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Raskin, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Is being cast on the FBI's efforts to investigate the New light is being cast on the FBI's efforts to investigate the Trump campaign. John Solomon's latest piece in the Hill newspaper details internal bureau memos about the pressure applied to Justice Department investigators and their effort to get a warrant on former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. An email exchange between infamous FBI agent Peter Strzok and his lover Lisa Page from October 14th of 2016, just a few weeks before the election, shows their desire to create talking points for then FBI Deputy Director Andy McCabe to help secure that warrant. One email from Strzok reads, in part, and I quote, "At minimum, that keeps the hurry the F up pressure on McCabe." And believe it or not, that is just the tip of the iceberg. Joining us now with reaction is Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch. Tom, thanks for joining us this morning. We buried the lead on this one. I'm going to put another quote up from Peter Strzok. This is from September 26th of 2016. He said, and as a pretext, he said this, and I quote, "At a minimum, the letter that Carter Page wrote provides us a pretext to interview him." Pretext is code for an excuse to interview Carter Page. How explosive is all this?
Oh, it's further confirmation that the Trump-Russia investigation was infected by this hyper-political bias against President Trump, where they're looking for excuses to target his team. You had Page write a letter complaining about an improper FBI leak, and the response from one of the top FBI officials, well, let's use this as an excuse to bring him in and interview him. And then they follow that up with the infamous FISA warrants, which were supported, which would never have been approved but for their reliance on the Clinton DNC dossier. And then another aspect of this, which is also in Solomon's piece, is that right after the election, they are talking about the day after the election, President Trump's elected, they focus on, well, we have to get all the people tied to Paul Manafort and compare notes and figure out what we're going to do there. Well, so Paul Manafort is being targeted not because of anything he did wrong, but the trigger is President Trump's election. Paul Manafort, by the way, right now is in solitary confinement.
Yes.
You know, President Trump should really think about ordering his Justice Department to at least shut this Mueller investigation down or pause it, given all the corruption in its formation in the FBI in 2016.
You're referring to an email from Strzok to Page where they said we need all of their names to scrub and we should give them ours for the same purposes. Scrubbing after the election, never a good look. Carter Page was actually on this network a couple of hours ago on Tucker's program speaking for himself. Listen to what Carter Page said.
Do you expect that you're going to be charged with anything after all of this?
Tucker, I couldn't even imagine anything that I could potentially be charged with. It's just, you know, particularly after seeing John Solomon's article today, it just becomes, you know, the whole, you know, using the term from that quote you had, pretext. The pretext was absolutely outrageous, ridiculous.
So they found a pretext. Then they surveilled the guy for a year. That sounds like a guy that seems pretty confident they didn't find anything. Was this indeed the witch hunt the president accuses?
Carter Page was a cooperating informant with the FBI, and Strzok knew that. That's why they used the phrase pretext. And the spying on Carter Page was a convenient vehicle to get at the Trump operation. And who knows what other FISA warrants and applications were corruptly sent over to the court as well. Carter Page isn't going to be prosecuted. There is no Russia collusion, and the only collusion that we're aware of with respect to Russia is Hillary Clinton using Fusion GPS to gather Russia intelligence to smear Donald Trump. Mueller ought to be investigating how his investigation started if he's looking for Russia collusion.
Tom, help us for a second, though. According to the most recent statement of expenditures, Mueller's operation is ramping up. What does that say to you?
Oh, well, there are no controls over Mueller, practically speaking. Not only does he have all of these other lawyers he's hired, all of which are registered Democrats, no registered Republicans, he's actually going into the Justice Department and, as needed, using other resources informally. So that budget is just a pretend number because the Justice Department's at Mueller's beck and call.
Here come the men in black. They won't let you